everyone. As Donna said, I'm Julia from Barwon Water. I'm not from our fleet and corporate services team, so I just want to apologise in advance. I've just been asked to do this because everyone was busy. I'm from our strategy and sustainability team, so I kind of come more from the climate mitigation, zero emissions side of things. There we go. That's all right, we can work with that. So before I start, I also just wanted to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land that we're on. And so our story kind of starts, we released our strategy 2030 about 18 months ago, which was about how we were going to kind of transform our business. It had 5 step change areas, and one of those was achieving zero emissions. And one of the reasons that we are aiming for zero emissions is that we are a really highly climate dependent business. We provide water and with climate change there's going to be less of it. So our board was very committed and committed to that, as well as the state government has given a very clear mandate to all water authorities in Victoria that we need to reduce our emissions. In case you don't know, the water authorities are owned by the state government, and they are the largest contributor to the government's emissions. So we contribute about 25% of all of the government's emissions. So our targets are 100% renewable by 2025 and zero net emissions by 2030. Part of the reason that we're aiming for 100% renewable first is that like 80% of our emissions come from electricity. So particularly treating sewage is very energy intensive and pumping things around. So we use a lot of electricity. And so only, our fleet is 11% of our so it's 11% of the leftover 20%. So it's 3% of all our emissions. And 11% of our scope 1, I suppose, is the easiest way to explain it. And so we are approaching it from a very standard carbon reduction hierarchy, in that we're trying to, improve efficiency, drive less, improve efficiency, and switch to electric. So around, I suppose shortly after our 2030 strategy was released and we were all getting excited about achieving zero emissions, we had 2 pool vehicles that needed to be replaced. So it was a really kind of simple and easy opportunity for us. At the time, we looked into 2 different vehicles, one being the Nissan Leaf and the other one being the Renault Zoe. And I think at the time it was just that the Nissan Leaf was a bit old, and the newer version was coming, but it wasn't quite available for when we needed it. So we ended up going with the Zoe. At the time, they also looked at the Kangoo for replacing our utes, but they just didn't have the right range. So I suppose a lot of our staff spent a lot of time driving all around the Otways, out to reservoirs and pump stations, and cover a lot of K. So most of our cars need to be all-terrain, large kilometres, but our fleet ones that we just use to drive around Geelong and head out on the Bellarine and that kind of thing was a better option. So you can see down the bottom kind of the comparison between the Cruise and the Zoe. And so I suppose one of the things that we were particularly interested in at the time is that it was going to save us about 2.9 tonnes of CO2 a year. And look, this is just a timeline of, I suppose, the decision, the sign-off to buy the EV, to how long it took us to get it and installed. So I think it took about 6 months to get the first one. We were also lucky in that we had just moved into a new building, so it was a good time to install charging stations and that kind of thing. And then, fairly shortly, so I think we got our first one in February last year, and it went so well, we got another one in April. So look, the challenges and opportunities is the lack of infrastructure, and that continues to be a challenge. Like the only place we can charge it is work. So I think we can get as far as Colac and back, and any further we can't really take the Zoe with us. And just, I suppose it went fairly well getting staff used to it. We did a similar thing. The fleet team did a very similar thing. We did some internal communications and targeted high users, took them in the car, drove them around, that kind of thing. Just got people comfortable with it. And I think, yeah, range anxiety is definitely probably the most common concern. But now, you know, it's almost exciting. Everyone gets excited when you take Zoe for a drive. So the uptake has gone really well and people are generally really comfortable with them. So this is just, we really haven't had them that long, but this is just some data about, like real-time data about how it's going. So it's costing us about $2.85 per 100 kilometres. Noting, I think, that we have assumed slightly higher electricity costs than some of the other presentations. But it's still, you know, $10 cheaper per 100 kilometres compared to internal combustion. So it's definitely much cheaper, and I think the fleet guy said it's about a third cheaper to operate. So they're really happy with how they're going, and you can see the blue is their usage. So they're getting good usage, particularly given we haven't had them very long. And you know, our staff are used to big cars because most of our cars are big ranges, and so it is a bit of an adjustment. So we are hopefully going to put some more EV charging stations in. We have operational sites all over the place, but we're particularly looking at these 4, mainly because we are building renewable energy assets there. So, you know, we'll be able to charge it with the energy that we generate on site. And in particular, at Colac, where we're doing a lot of solar, but we're also doing some waste to energy. So at Colac, we have anaerobic lagoons, which means that they produce methane. So we are looking into converting that into electricity, and so then we can have a poo-powered car. But we won't be the first water authority to do that. But and just, I suppose, if people are interested in more about the stuff we're doing in the renewables, so, you know, to get to 100%, we need to get to 30,000 megawatt hours a year, and we're doing that kind of through a bit of a portfolio approach. So we're building assets on our sites. We're also we're going to get at least, I think, about 60 or 70% through, like, probably power purchase agreements and that sort of thing. So we're in the process of negotiating those in partnership with, like, other water authorities and that sort of thing. And then also waste to energy is something that we're really looking into. And so, you know, the plan is to expand the fleet further. The challenges at the moment are kind of what I touched on before, being the range and also just the ability to cover the terrain. You know, if our guys are out in the Otways, often on some pretty dodgy tracks, 4-wheel driving, so, you know, the cars need to be able to handle those sorts of things. But the things that we're aware of that we'll need to think about are, you know, how will we cope when all our EVs are charging at once, so similar to what was being mentioned, and how do we optimise that? You know, there's opportunities to optimise and do it at particular times. And then also, you know, is there potential to use the cars as a battery? So if they're all sitting downstairs and they're all full and electricity is expensive, you know, could we use that to power the building for a little while, or that sort of thing? So there's lots of things that we're not really actively looking into this at the moment, but we're aware that we will need to, particularly as we expand the fleet.